Hi, it's Michael, and welcome to the podcast. Today, my guest is Sachs. He is the CEO and co-founder of Rewire Fitness. It is an app for athletes. It incorporates not just your typical stuff, but also cognitive and mental functioning as well. That's how it piqued my interest. I think you're going to find today's episode super interesting, so please welcome Sachs. Hello and welcome to the podcast. I'm Michael Seeley, and I'm really excited to have a very interesting guest here today that has a great product. His name is Sachs, and he is the CEO and founder of Rewire Fitness. And we have a lot to talk about today. I think you're going to find this podcast really interesting today. Sachs, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much, Michael. Yeah, we had a little back chat prior to the podcast and excited to dig into all the details.
We did. We had an interesting conversation. We'll just let viewers and listeners know. We both did this bike race way back when in 1983 in Colorado called the Red Zinger Mini Classic, and found out we both did the race at the same time. So that's kind of cool. It's kind of random. So I think that conversation really sparked our idea to have this podcast today, because I think we have a lot in common. And I really resonated with our conversation, and your product I think is amazing. And I'm not getting paid to say that. I've downloaded it, and it's pretty cool. So maybe we could just start off by talking about what the product is. I have a basic idea, but tell the viewers and listeners what the Rewire app is.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, the app is basically would be considered a new category in training and recovery called mental fitness. So we think about sort of what percentage of our performance is mental, how important the mental game is. We want to provide a structured way to train the mind like you would train your body. And that includes providing tools for understanding where you're at each day, which we call readiness. And then based on your state, either providing tools for building more resilience if you're mentally sharp that day, or if you need more recovery for the mind and the body, we're going to provide a tool for that, really around bringing protocols together to really increase the improvement in your state that day based on what you want to achieve.
Mm-hmm. Well, I like how you're talking about just the word state, right? Because it makes me think of state versus trait psychology. I was thinking about that before our podcast here, of like how both are really important, in that you can have, say, an athlete and their trait psychology might be really, let's say, aggressive, or it depends on the sport, right? But what I
Yeah,
like about your app is it works on state, so that you can have someone whose personality is really like a go-getter, but they can get into an unresourceful state, right? And
yep,
what it
exactly.
seems like what this app can help with is getting you, especially like your readiness to perform, like getting you in a state of performance, and at the same time, like being mindful of recovery and things like that. I want to ask you, I want to ask you about recovery in a second, because that's a super interesting topic
Yeah.
for me. I think it's really underrated with athletes. But I want to just first start off by asking you a little bit more about your background. What was the inspiration for this app? And just kind of tell us about the history of that and your background.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, my background, as we found we have in common. So I went into bike racing at an early age, 1983, in fact, 40 years ago, and based in Colorado, where I grew up, and really found sport to be an incredible outlet for me for not only just achievement, but also managing stress, having like a physical and emotional outlet. And I loved it. And all I wanted to do was become a professional athlete. I worked my way up to elite level. I started competing nationally. But I had this attitude of more is more, and I could always sort of dig deeper. And I kept digging myself into a hole. Eventually, from injury and mental and physical burnout, I just retired. So I had had enough. I literally walked away from the bike, didn't look at it for about 8 years, gave away a lot of my bikes. So you can imagine how bad that was. And then I found out that I had this natural proclivity in product and software development, went into that, and really built consumer and business products at scale for many years. Meanwhile, I stayed very close to performance, the latest science, went very deep in all kinds of areas like quantified self, started using HRV very early before it was very well known, went very deep into meditation, looked at all of these different tool sets, some of which I retained because they had a lot of value, whether it be HRV or mindfulness. And the last piece of the puzzle that led to the founding of Rewire was this particular branch of science around brain endurance training. And I became so enamored with the science. As soon as I heard about it, I knew it was a meaningful tool that could really change the game in sports performance, but it never came to market. And oftentimes taking something out of the lab and figuring out a way to apply it in the real world can be very difficult. So never came to market. One day I was on the bike trainer. I just had this epiphany. Oh, this is how it could be done. And I actually have the skills to develop it. So got together with my first co-founder. We created a prototype, started beta testing with athletes, and kind of the rest is history. But that's how it came about.
Wow, that's cool. I can totally relate to burning out in my cycling career as well. I had the same philosophy. I think you said more is more, right?
Mm-hmm.
When we know now that sometimes less is more, right? Especially with rest and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean that's interesting. I mean, our backgrounds are really similar. Yeah, for me, I definitely got burned out in road cycling, and that was about age 24, 25 when I quit, a little on the young side, and
Yeah.
definitely like there was a lot more in the tank there, right? But it's
Mm-hmm.
just like I'm done. I'm going to college, and like that's what I did. But yeah, then for you realizing that you're interested in software development, um, can you mentioned the word or the acronym HRV? What is that?
Yeah. So HRV, when you think about it's a heart rate metric, but when you think about your heart rate,
Yeah.
you imagine if you have like 60 beats per minute, that your heart rate is beating every second, on the second. But what actually happens is there's a variability between each heartbeat, and that's heart rate variability.
Hmm.
And what you would also imagine, like intuitively, is that if it's consistent, like every second, that's sort of a healthy heart. Actually, when it comes to training adaptation, you want a dynamic heart rate variability with a wide range. And the best kind of analogy that I could think of is if you think about a car, which has RPMs, you push on the gas, the RPMs go up. When you take your foot off the gas, you expect the car to ramp back down. If it doesn't, if it stays idling high, there's not a lot of variability, and the car has a problem, like that, right? Same thing with your heart. You want your heart to be able to dynamically respond to the challenges you give it. And if it's suppressed, you're going to have a low HRV. And so it's sort of you want to sort of build up that adaptation and that dynamic response to stress.
Okay, I see. Yeah. You mentioned another thing too, which is the quantified self. So a couple of things that were leading you into, the fruition of building the app there. So the HRV, so what's the quantified self? What's that?
Yeah, so must have been 15 years ago or so. I was basically trying to understand every possible biometric and lifestyle factor that could improve my performance. Get the kind of engineer in me. I was like, okay, I'm going to look at every single data point. I'm going to track it every day. I'm going to track, of course, what I eat. I'm going to track my HRV, which was very emerging at the time. I'm going to track, I'm going to look at the peak color and look at it on a scale, see if I have enough micronutrients. I'm going to put some subjective metrics in, put all this data in. And I did that for quite a while. What I found is that I put all the data in, and what seemed to be the most correlative was HRV. So I was like, okay, that metric I can count on. It's reliable. I'm putting that in my toolkit. A A lot of the other stuff I let go of, but I still, of course, look at sleep, super important. I still care about, diet and nutrition, and of course, recovery, super important.
Okay, got it. So it's like the convergence of heart rate variability, sleep, recovery. That's what you're saying the quantified self is?
It's well, people go very, very deep with it. It's basically this idea that you collect as much data as possible and use that to inform how to get better. And so these days, actually, it's a fairly popular trend within biohackers. You'll see people are doing all kinds of, like, let's say, blood work or other types of diagnostics. So there's definitely a kind of subgroup of type A folks that love doing all the testing.
Okay,
Yeah,
got it. So as much as you can quantify, the more the better for measurement there. Got
yeah,
it.
yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm such a Luddite. Like so, I live here in Naples, Florida, and moved here a couple years ago, and I haven't used Strava. I really kind of got back into cycling recently, and I didn't have Strava, and people are like, "What do you mean you don't have Strava?" I don't have a heart rate monitor. I have like nothing on
Yeah,
the bike, and people were just like thought I was crazy. I was like, I didn't get it. Then I started getting a little more
yeah.
into tech, and it's like you get all this feedback. Like
Hmm.
it's cool as long as you're not like staring at your handlebars when you're flying down a hill, right? Um,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah. The one thing I was thinking about a lot before our podcast is just the idea, concept of recovery. And like we're talking about burnout. Uh, do you think recovery is still really underrated with athletes and coaches, or do you think that people are kind of wising up in the modern era that it is necessary to, plan out your recovery?
yeah. It's a really good question, and there's a lot of conflicting influences out there. There are, you still have the influencers that are trying to show you should just push past every possible physical limitation, and that's how you're going to get more resilient. And so there's this like idea of this trope of like you just beat yourself up and you just become superhuman, which is not great. And then for especially in endurance sports, you tend to have a lot of type A personalities and perfectionists and people that really want to do their absolute best every single time, and that's also counter to recovery. But you do have a lot of trends now with ice baths and percussion instruments and recovery boots and all kinds of things that people kind of like to geek out on, and I think that's helping. And there's certainly a lot of data out there that shows like you're going to get stronger when you're providing enough recovery. It's not about you're just going to make all your gains while you're training, right? So I think it's still kind of a mixed bag and still a big problem.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that there is this trend of yeah, like just train, push through. Like I'm a fan of David Goggins. I probably know who he is.
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
and there's a lot of a lot of like personal power in hearing his story. At the same time, though, um, is like recovery and rest is really important. So it's like, yeah, just culturally, I think it is becoming more okay and cool to do some recovery. And if you think about if you don't do it, well, if you do it, you're going to be building more. Like there's, I think the discussion needs to happen of like, it's almost like trying to think of a good metaphor for it, but it's like it strengthens the whole ship basically when you're recovering. And I think
Yeah.
that needs to be talked about more. But like with your app, you're getting prompts to do that. It's saying like, hey, here's what's going on with you. Like, and it can give athletes permission, I would think, to have lighter training or back off, as opposed to I've got to grind, and you have this app reminding you like, hey dude, like here's your stats. You sure you want to do that? Right?
Yeah, exactly. And we do try to make it cool. Your recovery sessions, if you want, get posted to Strava automatically. So
Okay.
people see, hey, you're getting some recovery on.
There we go. Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Like it. I want to have you define resilience. Well, and in terms of your concept of it as it pertains to the app there.
Yeah. I mean, in general, what I would say is like it's your ability to adapt to unpredictable situations. Um, it's um, it's this ability that you can let go of the particular goal or mindset that is might be standing in your way at a particular time if you're confronted with a challenge. I really like the Bruce Lee quote, "Be like water."
Mhm.
Think about how water responds to any obstacle, right? It just adapts.
Right.
So that ability to adapt is really helpful in sport because especially endurance sports, you're out there for a long time a lot of times, and you never know what's going to happen, and so you can't possibly predict everything, and
Mhm.
so you got to be able to be in a position to be able to adapt, and in life as well, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
Yeah. I like that definition. I mean, it's like this ability to be flexible in your mindset and adapt and like you say adjust your goals. It also makes me think about persistence as well. Like for some reason the word resilience
mhm.
um, I kind of synonymous with persistence, as in like shift, pivot, adapt, be flexible, and don't give up. Does that resonate with you too?
Yeah.
Kind of like the persistence part of that, or I don't know.
No,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah, because it's not like if you're resilient, it's not like you're saying, okay, stop, guys, time out. Instead, you're actually rolling with it again to still redirect towards your goal.
Mhm.
The really interesting part is the particular cognitive task that we have in the app targets the part of your brain that's responsible for goal-driven behavior.
Mhm.
And it's also the part of your brain that um, assesses your perception of effort. So if you're under a lot of stress and cognitive and physical stress, you'll actually misperceive how difficult something is, and then as a result, start to take your foot off the pedal in most cases. And so what this thing does is it basically it creates a more cognitive load so that over time there is a adaptation, which then results in your ability um, to withstand some of those cognitive physical challenges
Yeah.
towards your ultimate goal. Which
Yeah.
so like those, I think the goal driven piece is absolutely part of why resilience sort of works or why it's so important.
Yeah. No, I love that. So it's the perception of effort. So there's literally a part of your brain which is responsible for your own perception of the effort that you're putting out, or even anticipation of an effort that you're going to put out. And that's dependent on a lot of things like if you get a terrible night's sleep, that's going to throw that off. Or if you're undertrained or overtrained, um, stress in your life in general, like all that's going to come and affect that perception of effort. Yeah.
Yeah, and a good way to think about it that's very relatable is if you just think about like you have a hard day of work or a really stressful time maybe on the personal side. If at the end of the day you then have to go work out, maybe a high intensity session, one, it's going to be very hard to motivate. But two, if you actually went out and worked out, it would feel harder. Like
Mhm.
you would feel drained going into the workout. And that is the cognitive fatigue that's going to impact your perception of effort, which then, if it feels harder, it is harder. And now you're, sort of pushing a big boulder up a hill. You
Right.
know?
Right. So the Rewire app does like mini training sessions in that. So it'll actually, yeah, basically train the brain of like, okay, here we're going to surprise you with some extra effort. You may feel like a mini overwhelm at first, but the more we give you these little exercises, the easier it's going to be for you to adapt. say when you're feeling like I'm in a bike race and I want to drop out the hill. This hill is too hard. Using the Rewire app, there might be that moment. I'm guessing of like I want to soft pedal. Be like, no, let me just push a little harder. Like I've been here before. This sort of surprise of being like a mini overwhelm. Am I getting that right with your
Yeah,
app? Yeah.
yeah, you really are. Because like if we think about the bike race example, there's not a lot of times you get to practice overcoming that situation. You definitely do in competition. And to do it in training means you're actually pushing yourself really hard, and that's going to have diminishing returns and other consequences, right? But if you could just have a direct path to that brain overload and just do that without even negatively impacting your physical training, fantastic.
Yeah.
You can get a lot of practice in that place. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because, yeah, like you say, if you're going to practice that that perception of effort and strengthening that in actual training, you're gonna fry yourself. You're gonna like have a really hard workout. But if you can do it on your app and have those little prods, right? Like, oh, here we go, and then your brain goes, oh, here we go. I've been here before. That's great. I love that. Um, cool. Let's see. God, there's so many questions I want to ask you here. I want to ask you about self-talk. Is there something in the, I don't think there is. I was looking over the app, but correct me if I'm wrong. Is there something that works on self-talk directly, or maybe influences self-talk, and meaning positive self-talk?
Yes, there is.
Okay.
Yeah, we have a pretty deep app, so it takes a while to see
Okay.
all
Okay.
the features. Yeah, so the short phrases you can repeat to yourself that are really going to sort of cue your mental state, whether it be you want to focus on performance or recovery or stress management. Basically, the way we've built it is we researched very common self-talk phrases used by high performance athletes, uh, built them into the app, but also created a tool for you to create your own. So if there is something, it is helpful if you can personalize it and come up with a phrase that really helps you. Like for instance, for me, I like calm and focused, right? I'm gonna stay even with my emotions. I'm gonna stay focused. Um, and that's personal to me. And I could put it into the app and practice it. It'll actually come up during the harder intervals for the brain training, so you can practice using it when you actually need it. And then outside of the app, of course, it's a tool you can use in competition and training.
Very cool. Yeah. Well, yeah, I need to spend some more time on the Rewire app and drill deeper. I'm a big fan of self-talk and just how powerful it is. Very cool. Hey, so what do you think? This is a question I was, coming up with some questions before the show here, and this one, it's not really a gotcha question, but it's what do you think would be the number one factor that keeps an athlete who's at a plateau from leveling up to the next level? Yeah, what do you think that might be?
So something that's preventing them from leveling up.
Yes.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean it's there could be a number of things clearly depending on the individual. Um,
Assume, and I would let me
yeah,
preface it by saying, assuming
yeah,
they have the actual physical capacity to level up.
hmm yeah. They might be um, they might not be giving themselves enough time for recovery.
Mhm.
That's definitely possibly a big one. Their lifestyle might not be very sustainable, so maybe they're just pushing it every workout, and of course they're gonna not reach their full capacity because they're often overloaded.
Yeah.
There could be a mindset component too, possibly. But I think that kind of sustainable lifestyle is really important. If you can be consistent with your training, reduce your injuries, be able to just keep making small incremental gains, not get caught up in the numbers too much and trying to like PR every workout. It goes a long way over time. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that answer. I think there's so many athletes that, that I see and I work with in my coaching programs, who are just don't have a lot of patience. On the one hand, that's great because it shows their fire and their spirit, right? But
Yeah.
it's like sometimes it's like slow down to speed up. So yeah, so if you can realize that recovery, and I also see a lot of athletes who don't do enough recovery.
Yeah.
And so that if you can think about like, yeah, just being the art of patience. So it's patience, I don't think is holding yourself back or copping out or anything like that. It's more of like, okay, like I admit that I need to do some recovery right now. And that's actually gonna be the quicker way to level up if I start, pacing things out more, right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah, totally.
Very cool. So Sun, maybe you could show us a little bit of how the app works, the Rewire app, and give at least some of our viewers who are watching this on YouTube a little taste of the app here.
So, so this is the Rewire app. We can see here, this is, it's bringing in the data from my workouts today. So sort of it knows what I've been up to. It also has my morning readiness assessment here. So we'll open that up and take a look. So my overall score is 54. That's out of 100. That's considered baseline. So it's actually a good place to be. But then when we scroll down, we can see what areas of need I have. So emotional, great; physical, solid; cognitive, we can open this up. We can see I'm 6% off my baseline. So I've been burning the midnight oil with some work, and my cognitive state is compromised. 6% is actually a pretty big deal. So what do I do about it? Let's say I just want to focus on recovery. So I would hit prepare for the day, and then it's going to ask me, what do you want to do? I want to recover. So it's going to take all that information on understanding where I'm at and my goal, and it's going to recommend the sessions. So typically they're 2 to 4 minutes, and they're going to combine a bunch of different protocols. So we're going to bring in typically a breathing modality. In this case, we're also recommending subliminal priming. So we're going to prime the athlete with positive imagery. And the goal, of course, is recovery. So we're not going to go through the whole thing, but I'll just start it so you guys can see how it works. You'd say how you're feeling at the moment. We'll ask you again afterwards. And you could even connect a heart rate monitor, and we'll track sort of how your body changes over that course. So it'll teach you these different breathing techniques, and then it'll seamlessly transition to other protocols like the priming. But let's just say hypothetically, I still needed to, like, this was the day of a race, and despite my situation, I'm not going to cancel. I still want to perform. So I would hit this physical performance, and now it's going to understand your state. And what your goal is. So it's going to give you a different set of protocols. So in this case, it's going to be a hyperventilation protocol, which is you want to do maybe 30 minutes before competition. It's going to get you into, a positive fight or flight state, like a sympathetic state. You're also going to have binaural beats that'll get your mind into a focused state. And there'll be some other things thrown in, like visualization. So you're going to think about your game plan and a little bit of self-talk. So you come out of it feeling vitalized, calm. What we like to say is a calm, ready state for performance. That is it in a nutshell. And you can also connect with all your wearables and bring in all that data as well.
Wow, that's really cool, Son. I love that. Especially, what's new to me is the cognitive fatigue. So that if you're looking at, if you're feeling physically at your baseline, and your emotional is good. And but then what the app does is like say, hey, your cognitive is you know what, you might need some work. So that is something I think that athletes don't really realize, is that cognitive strain. Like especially athletes have jobs. There's some of them are doing podcasts. Like if you're doing some activity that requires a lot of brain power the day before a competition, that can really, really impact you, right?
Yeah, we've talked to a lot of athletes all the way up to the pro level that, they have a lot of obligations. They're doing social media posts and interviews and things like that. And then they have a poor race the next day and they're thinking in their minds like, I didn't do anything. I just sat around all day. Why did I not have, the kind of race I thought I would? And this cognitive fatigue, it's going to impact so many things, your decision making, your ability to keep focused. It's cognitively demanding to push yourself in competition, obviously. And so if you go in at a deficit, that'll impact your performance. And the other part of it is like why we have the diagnostic tools, because you wouldn't know. How would you even know if you're in a cognitively bad state unless you have a way to measure it?
Right. Yeah. I wonder for the emotional aspect too. Can this measure how healthy your relationship is with your spouse?
I wish. No, but it will. What it will do is we use a subjective questionnaire, and it's a validated scale, so it's science-based, in other words. And what it'll do is pick up on some basics. So your perceived level of stress, your perceived level of readiness, your frustration. So like frustration is a red flag. If you have more frustration than normal, that actually is very correlative to heavy load on the cognitive side, right? So like this cascade or this chain of consequences, you get a bad night's sleep, your brain is fatigued, it didn't recover, you lack the cognitive control, you start having negative thoughts, like all these things can sort of cascade from just that one lifestyle situation.
Yeah, that is the perfect word for it, cascade, right? Because you can have that negative cascade, and it just makes sense, right? If you're not getting enough sleep, if maybe you're I don't know, a friend or teammate, or like you're grumpy, someone's grumpy at you, that's going to cascade even more, etc. But you can have positive cascade too, right? So that you can get the proper amount of sleep. You're checking your recovery, your emotional battery, your cognitive battery, and that's going to cascade up, hopefully, right?
Yeah, I like the battery idea because it is something where you have sort of a limited supply in a lot of cases. You only have so much willpower or resilience and your emotionality, like all those things. Yeah, if you got to recharge. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this is a super exciting app, the Rewire app, and I'm going to definitely check it out. I'm quite a bit more. I'm getting pulled into the 21st century eventually here. I'm about 23 years behind, but I'm getting there. This is some amazing stuff, super interesting, and just really important for athletes. And I kind of makes me think you don't really have to be an athlete to use this, like a super serious athlete. You don't have to be a super serious, right?
Yeah, not at all, actually. We've had a lot of people find us who wouldn't even say that they're athletes, like emergency workers and doctors and people from the military. Like just people that want to perform and understand that the mental part of it is important. And yeah, you could jump right in and start using it, even if you're not an athlete or you're a new to sport as well.
Cool. Well, son, I have a bunch more questions, but we're gonna move towards wrapping it up here. I'm really impressed by the app, and again, your story is similar to mine, so I can totally relate to how this was born out of frustration in some ways, but then also your interest in optimizing, and so I think it's just really a cool product. Anything else you want to add to either our discussion today? Any final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I would just underscore your statement about recovery and recognizing how important that is. And recovery, just like training, can come in many forms. So it doesn't have to be, oh, I have to sit on the couch for 2 hours and watch Netflix or whatever it is. It could just be hitting the reset button with some breath work for 2 minutes. Surprisingly, that can help reset your mindset, make you feel physically a little bit better. It could be a short nap. There's so many ways to apply it. Even if you feel like you're too busy, it's much better to do something and have those incremental improvements than to do nothing because it's not the perfect situation or the perfect time.
That is a great note to end on. Do a little something, doesn't have to be perfect, right?
That's right.
Awesome. All right. Well, Sachs of the Rewire Fitness app, go check it out, everyone. Such a pleasure talking with you today, and thanks for listening, everyone. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Michael.
Well, I hope you enjoyed today's episode of my interview with Sachs of Rewire Fitness. Such an interesting conversation, such a great app. If you're interested in the app, you can go to rewirefitness.app. That's rewirefitness.app. Find out more about the app. It's also available on your app stores. And thanks again for listening to Michael Seeley's Sports Psychology Podcast. We'll see you next time.